Should designers code? It is a question that you will find all over Twitter. You'll read articles on Medium. Designers in this case, I think we're talking about web designers, native app designers, product designers, UX designers, etc. The short answer is, in my opinion, yes. Certain designers for sure. All designers, probably not. But there are a lot of designers that I feel like could greatly benefit from learning a little bit, at least a little bit of code. There's programming, there's logic, there's development. What does all this stuff mean? When I'm talking about designers, I mean people who spend most of their day in Figma, in Sketch, in XD, or Photoshop, or Illustrator. You make interfaces, you make UI. Should you learn to code? Let's go over here to the desktop, and let's just ask. Code is a set of instructions written in a programming language, which tells the computer how to perform a specific task. It's like a recipe that the computer follows to execute programs and applications. Okay, yeah, that's code. Well, let's ask this question. What is the difference between code and programming? Code refers to the actual text written in a programming language. Programming, on the other hand, is the process of designing, writing, testing, maintaining this code. It's the broader activity that involves problem solving and thinking logically to make the code work as intended. Okay, so should designers program? Maybe to a degree, maybe a little bit. But to me, code is when I think of code, I think of syntax. Syntax in programming is the set of rules that defines combinations of symbols that are considered to be correctly structured programs in that language. It's like grammar in a language, determining how you can arrange words and punctuation. In coding, it's about how you arrange code, symbols, and keywords to create a valid program. So I think one of the biggest aspects of this topic is, should designers learn this syntax in order to contribute to the production code, the development code, the repo, or should they kind of stay in their lane, in their tooling, and just kind of live over there in Figma, in Sketch, and XD, etc. So let's go back to the main camera here. You've got designers. They spend their time over here in Figma, XD. They're creating assets. They're creating files. They're just in their own silo. And then there's my dog. Then you've got developers. You kind of hand those Figma files off, and Figma's introduced tools like developer mode, and it helps kind of create a better handoff between design and development, and that's great. But what if design and development kind of happened in tandem, in the same medium, in the same repo? Because one of the things that happens, and I know I've done this, where design teams will spend all this time and effort, and we build out these massive design files where we create almost every single screen, sometimes like many screens, just to indicate a flow, and we make these prototypes, and it makes it feel like you can click through that, and it's powerful. And Figma, to their credit, they've introduced a lot of stuff that makes that process easier and more manageable. And I would argue that they've introduced, coding. They've introduced variables, things like that. They've introduced even logic now. They've introduced that to make that job easier for designers. But the question is, that still all lives outside of the repo. I always say you can't ship a Figma file. You can't ship a Figma file to production. There are tools, and I'm sure there's a future where, especially with AI, going from Figma to a live website, it's reasonable. You can have code generated from Figma and other tools. Anyway, the point is, should designers code? I think yes. I think if you are the type of designer, if you find yourself naming all of your layers and being very articulate, and you use variables, and you're just very specific, and you're organizing all your frames and all that stuff. You do all that in Figma or Sketch, you're the type of designer that I'm talking to, who I believe should give it a go. It's 2024. Let's do something new. Let's go back to the desktop here. Let's just play around here for 2 minutes in Figma. Yeah. So you're in here all day. You're creating boxes, We're going to put these, and you're using auto layout, and you're setting this all up. You're saying, you're going to create components, you're going to have images, and you're going to have text, and you're going to create this whole design system, right? And that's all going to live inside Figma. And you're going to have everything pretty. You're going to have variables. You're going to have all your color tokens, and you're going to do all that in Figma, and that doesn't exist anywhere but inside Figma. You can't ship that, right? I think that's a problem. I would argue that using Figma as a sketching tool, 100%, I think that's great. I think that's great. You can come in here and you can explore ideas faster in Figma, dragging things around, exploring. You can do that a lot faster in Figma. And I think that's what Figma should be for. But when we start creating complete design systems, design libraries, when we start doing all this stuff in Figma, you just have to consider that when you put all this time and effort in and keep all this stuff in Figma, what if all of this effort that you did in your Figma files, if all that time was actually maintaining a design system in code, right? That to me would be awesome. That Figma is an incredible tool. But I wish the underlying output, or at least in some capacity, or I wish there was, maybe it's not Figma, I wish there was a tool for designers to have this style of GUI interface, adding strokes, drop shadows, sizing things, laying things out, in this auto layout, right? I can control the spacing, right? You can do all this stuff, you obviously do this all in code, but why have two versions of it? That's why I think it's so important for certain designers to learn how to do this in code, so that yes, Figma becomes the place where you sketch out ideas, you get stuff to a point where you're happy with it, you've got buy-in, but start making a real version in code, especially on the web. You can ship things on the web super easy, get it into clients' hands, get it onto, different platforms, phones, tablets, desktops, Macs, PCs, all different browsers, all that stuff. You can do that so easy on the web. But yeah, I just get frustrated because I think a lot of time is put into making these, pixel perfect designs. I want to go back to the conversation about what is code. I'm not talking about should designers program. If you are designing for the web, learn HTML and CSS at the very minimum. We got to talk about AI. I mean, AI obviously is going to have a huge impact on design and designers and developers. It already has. I use AI almost every day. And I think that kind of makes it the best time in the world to learn this stuff, because you have a tutor right next to you all the time where you can get help. But you can't rely on AI to do everything perfectly. I think you're going to run into issues where you're going to have AI write you're going to upload, your Figma file or a screenshot of your Figma file, and it's going to output some code, and you're like, oh, this is great. And you're going to be like, but it doesn't work exactly like I thought it would, because all you did in Figma was, you created a static picture to upload, and it made a lot of assumptions on what you meant by that. And I mean, really, that's kind of what developers do when you hand off to a developer and say, hey, make this work. And you might send them 2 different breakpoints for your web project or your web page. Okay, what does it look like? The infinite number of sizes that a browser window can be. This goes for native apps too. And in some ways, I think native kind of jumped ahead a little bit, especially with Xcode, what Xcode and Apple's doing with Swift UI. But the point I want to get to with Xcode has a great GUI to generate layouts. So this is, what they've done with Swift UI, this is kind of like HTML. It's a markup. It's kind of built for designers, right? It's a code editor here on the left, but it's got, it's very approachable because you've got drop downs and you got alignment and you've got, padding and all that kind of stuff that you have in something like Figma. So I wish Figma was more like this, where instead of your layers palette, it's like a text editor. It's your code. I wish that was the underlying structure. Now, there are tons of challenges with that. It's easy just to say I wish Figma did this. So Figma, I wish it was more like this. It's not. Figma introduced a lot of really powerful tools, and I kind of love it and hate it. I love it because it gives designers the ability to really speed up how quickly they can create prototypes and interactive stuff like that. All right, let's just look at this for a second. We've got designers inside Figma creating all these variables. It's if you're doing this, if you're putting all this time into these kind of assets, at least consider learning how to code. You're already there. You're so close. Okay. I'd love to hear, I don't know. Tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway,